All right. Hey, my friends, and welcome to today's episode where I want to talk about something that I wish I would have learned or known the very, very beginning of my journey. Something that took me a long time to learn. And that I want to share today. Before we dive in, if you don't know me, my name is Matt Codde, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker and the founder of Restored Minds. And if you are looking for help on your journey to recovery from OCD and anxiety and chronic stress, I have some links that I've put down in the notes just for you to get you started on the right path, as well as I have some great resources over at restoredminds.com that you can explore. And if you are benefiting from this show, please take a quick second and help us by liking and subscribing and leaving a nice review if you're joining us via iTunes or Spotify. It takes a second, but it really does help us. And it would mean a lot to me if you take the time to do so. So, what is it that I wish I would have known in the past or known at the start of my journey that I think would have really consolidated a lot of time for me on my own path to recovery? And that is that effort, willful effort, does not equate to results. Meaning, the more effort you put in does not instantly put out more results. There's not an exchange of effort for results. In fact, a lot of times we can put so much effort forth that we get more negative results. And so working hard or working harder at this doesn't do anything. In fact, and like I just explained, sometimes it can be extremely counterproductive, and sometimes it can take you in the complete opposite direction. See, because we're taught in a society that values achievement, and there's nothing wrong with achievement, by the way, but like a lot of times we will prioritize achievement incorrectly and harmfully in some ways. But the idea of achievement is often done from a very egotistic and willful oriented place. Like, I am going to achieve this. I'm going to will my way there. I'm going to make this happen. And while, yeah, you do need an individualistic drive to want to get better, healing is much more about co-conspiring than it is with or co-collaborating, I think would be the best word to say that. Co-collaborating than it is force. It's much more about aligning with power versus force, like Hawkins would talk about. Healing happens. You can't make a healing happen. And a lot of times when we're trying to make a healing happen, or we're trying to make something happen, we're indirectly working at the healing process itself. It's very contradictory. So, for instance, let's take the paradigm that I operate from versus the paradigm that a lot of you are probably operating from, and maybe evaluate how this could be going on for you. So, initial paradigm most people have, it just means a frame of mind of how you're perceiving something, really, is that, oh, I have OCD or anxiety or chronic stress, and so these uncomfortable emotions that I feel are the very problem, right? The corresponding intrusive thoughts or the unwanted thoughts that are popping in my mind and racing through my mind are the issue. So I'm going to do everything I can to get rid of these with the presupposition that once I get rid of them, I'll have achieved healing. Now, if you look at that, I mean, that seems pretty like mathematically accurate, right? 1 + 1 = 2. I get rid of my thoughts, I get rid of my feelings, that equals, health. Because the definition of health in this case being the absence of these experiences. So, where different paradigm that's potentially something you could consider, right? Something that we operate from in Restored Minds is that healing is actually trying to take place through this process. And what do I mean? Well, it's like throughout our life, we've had these emotions, right? We've had all sorts of emotional experiences. And for the most part, we have not done a good job of releasing them and processing them and letting them go. So what we've done instead is we've stored them, right? Now, you can use Western psychological wording for this: suppression or repression, right? We've pushed the emotion down. We've pushed the experience itself down. We got resistant the moment it happened. So we buried it, right? And then we do defense mechanisms against the emotion. So we project the emotion outside. We deny its existence. We spiritually bypass, right? We medicate and avoid. We're just going to, hey, I'm going to smoke a bunch of weed. I'm going to do all this stuff to get rid of this emotion. I'm going to manage my emotion. So what I do is I distract myself. I stay really busy. I escape. I binge watch Netflix. I have to listen to a podcast when I do the dishes because I might have an intrusive thought, right? All this stuff. There's nothing healthy about any of this stuff. Nothing healthy at all, right? But that's how a lot of us have handled this to this point. And then eventually the tank gets so full in here that there's some kind of exploding event that we perceive as the inciting incident to the disorder, but really it's a secondary experience to an ongoing process that was not efficient, not effective, and destructive in its very nature, which was not learning how to confront and be with what is. And eventually that just became unmanageable. So what happens is that our tank is like, hey, well, you need to get rid of this. And so there's this underlying healing principle within us that pushes the stuff to the surface, right? These emotions come to the surface in what we would call triggers. And then because we resist it, we essentially push it back down. And through our effort and our coping and our strategies, I'm going to go do this and do this and do this and do this to get rid of the emotion, we indirectly are preventing the very release of it. And the release of it would allow for the healing to begin. The release of it is part of the healing, if you will. Very different paradigm to operate from. And unfortunately, that's the majority of what people do is they operate from the first paradigm, try to use the techniques that they've learned, and then try to make those techniques fit that paradigm, when oftentimes the techniques are designed in paradigm 2 to facilitate the more paradigm 2 way of thinking. All this to say, your effort, if we're coming at it from these two paradigms, if you're using a lot of effort to push down, to escape, to avoid, to get rid of, to prevent the emotional experiences because you perceive them as the problem or the thoughts as the issue, all your effort is actually going to paradoxically make you worse over time, which is why the OCD and anxiety loop exists. All the compulsions make you worse, right? We know this. Interestingly enough, if you change the entire paradigm that you're operating from, you see that effort itself is actually hindering the process most of the time. And that the effort you're putting forth is not going to equate to results. And we know this in every aspect of life. I mean, how many fruitful relationships have, I would say more often than not, if you have someone who's really wanting a relationship and trying to force it to happen, so they're on all these different dating apps and they're having all these conversations with all these people and going on all these different, and they have 3, 4, 5 relationships going at once, how many of those stories versus the random people that meet unexpectedly and start chatting and ultimately create a relationship, how many more stories of success do you see in life where there was no effort involved? There was when you actually have the correct paradigm and are going with life and working with what is, that things tend to align way better than any force and effort that you're putting into it. Oftentimes it's when the person in the dating world stops trying to date that they end up meeting someone and things go great. Effort comes from control. Control comes from fear. When we fear our emotions and we attempt to control them. When we fear that we don't naturally heal, we try to control the healing. When we control, we end up indirectly messing up the process often. And that, my friends, today is the message that I want to share, is that effort. If you find yourself putting forth a lot of effort and thinking that you can effort your way to this, in my experience, most of the time that's going to work directly against your recovery process. So with that, hope you all have a wonderful day. Thank you for taking the time to tune in, and wishing you all a great day. Talk to you soon. Hey there. Thanks so much for watching that episode. If you found it helpful, we have some links to some other episodes that we think you might like as well. And if you're looking for help on your journey to recovery from fear, stress, and anxiety, either check out the links in the notes or head over to restoredminds.com. Thank you and talk to you soon.